Might a supplement which is more typically associated with the bodybuilding world actually help those who are physically unable to go to the gym, namely those with ME-CFS and long COVID? My name is Patrick Ussher. I'm an ME-CFS patient and author of the book Understanding ME-CFS and Strategies for Healing. And today I am talking with Dr. Courtney Craig, who has spent most of her professional, academic and personal life learning about and dealing with ME-CFS. And we will be talking today about creatine, because that indeed is the supplement that I was referring to. And Dr. Craig is probably the most knowledgeable person on the planet when it comes to the topic of creatine and ME-CFS, because she did her whole master's thesis in clinical nutrition all about the supplement. So we're going to be talking about what the dosage should be, what kind of side effects might one expect, and more importantly, what kinds of improvements should taking creatine lead to, in principle, if you have ME-CFS. Before we get going, I should say that Dr. Craig is offering viewers of this channel 15% off her nutrition and ME-CFS video courses. That's a pure discount code. It's not an affiliate link. You can find the details in the description box below. Excellent. So, Courtney, I want to ask you about creatine. Now, you did a whole master's thesis on creatine. Would you like to tell us a bit more about this supplement? Because it does seem to be something that it makes a lot of sense for ME, because it helps with ATP and ADP recycling. And it kind of builds up the body's kind of storage capacity to do that better. So tell us about your interest in creatine, and, what do you think are the main takeaways for an ME-CFS patient?
Yeah, so when I was getting my master's in nutrition, I was really starting to get interested in mitochondrial research around ME-CFS. And I think that's how I landed on creatine, because I was very interested in different sorts of mitochondrial nutrients for ME-CFS, things like CoQ10, other sorts of like lipid replacement and things like that. Also, D-ribose and things like that. So there's a very big interest in targeting the mitochondria at that time in ME-CFS. And I think I tried a lot of these interventions and none of them really worked for me. And, it made me think about the complexities of the mitochondria. It's like a chain of events, and where do you target it to actually have an effect, on energy production? Because the goal, of course, is always to improve energy production in these conditions, and then we have less fatigue. So somehow on the lines, I got really interested in creatine, and it's just a fascinating molecule that has been studied for so long. Because of its use in bodybuilding and fitness circles. And people don't really know what it is unless you're in that world. But it's one of the cheapest, best studied supplements, I think, of all time. And people are really interested in its other effects other than, bulking up and having more weightlifting capacity. So, creatine monohydrate, it's one of the cheapest supplements out there. It's usually very well tolerated. People can take very, very high doses of it and have minimal side effects, but it acts as a kind of surrogate energy source, as you just mentioned. So as soon as it's also very well absorbed. That's another problem with a lot of supplements, is they're not absorbed very well. They have poor bioavailability and they have to be formulated in very expensive liposomes and all of this stuff. Creatine is cheap and it's like 95% absorbed when it's taken. So we have receptors that take in creatine specifically, and as soon as it enters the body, it gets phosphorylated into creatine, phosphocreatine, and that can actually help with the ADP, ATP recycling at the mitochondria. So it acts as another energy source. So instead of relying on glucose and all of these fats and things, we can actually use creatine to make energy.
And is it it's funny you mentioned the bodybuilding, because I always used to just dismiss creatine because I just thought, that's what the bodybuilders do. I'm not a bodybuilder. I have ME-CFS. I'm happy if I can walk for, 4,000 steps. But I've been really interested in it recently. And so with that alternate energy source, how does it work? I believe it gets stored in your muscles and then the body kind of can access that source in some way.
Yeah, so we store creatine and we store it in tissues that are the most metabolically active. So heart, lungs, testes, and brain. So yeah, it's a energy to pull from. We have glycogen stored in liver and muscle also to pull from to make, glucose to turn it into energy. But we know in ME-CFS, that process is kind of inhibited somehow. We don't have normal glycolysis, and energy production seems to be impaired somehow with the glucose metabolism. And also in the brain in particular, we're learning like the brain doesn't take up glucose as well in ME-CFS. We have a hypometabolism, low glucose levels in the brain. So creatine can actually be taken up by the brain and used as an alternate energy source and stored there. So, intuitively, that's like, oh, that sounds interesting. But what's also really interesting about creatine is that it supports the mitochondrial shape and structure. And in ME-CFS, this seems to be a problem too, because the mitochondria I've seen in tissue studies that they're damaged. The cristae, inside the mitochondria, lose their structure, and then instead of them being cleaned up with cellular death, they actually linger around and create a lot of inflammatory mediators. So creatine can actually help the mitochondria create a protein called cardiolipan, which acts like scaffolding for the mitochondria to help them support their structure better. And of course, better structure, better function. So it has multiple effects. So it acts as an energy source, and it can help stabilize mitochondrial membranes and give them structure.
That is so fascinating. It really is. So it's doing a double action, both very important for ME-CFS. And I suppose the question I'd love to ask you is, what's the kind of dose that people might be thinking of? Because I'm taking 5 grams of it at the moment, and I have noticed an improvement in my muscles, doing better. But there was a study that came out recently, I think in long COVID, or was it ME-CFS? But it was like 16 grams a day, I think. And they did it for, a few months, and it was really good results. So what are your thoughts on dosage and what's safe and what's going to help someone?
Yeah, so according to, I think it's the Exercise Physiology American College or whatever, you can take safely up to 30 grams, I believe, per day for an extended period of time without any sort of damage to the kidneys. The thing with that is it's very impractical and it's not easy to stomach. So usually it's taken as a powder. You maybe mix it in a little juice to help it dissolve and drink it. And it's hard to that's a lot. Volume-wise, that like 15, 20 grams of creatine is a large amount. So we need better ways to do this. And I think, and I hope that in ME-CFS, maybe we can do some clinical trials giving it intravenously, because I do think that patients probably need that large amount to get a therapeutic effect. And just taking it orally is impractical. And also it can tend to be like acidic in the stomach and cause some digestive upset if you take really large quantities of it. And some patients just react to it poorly as well and have to take 1 gram or so. So, with all supplements, delivery and feasibility is challenging. So I would like to see some studies where it's given intravenously and to see what it does there. But again, if people want to try it, they should start very slow and titrate up, because it can actually cause a Herx reaction, because it does have some effects with immune function as well. So
assuming someone could tolerate it okay and they work up, what do you think is a good dose for an ME-CFS patient?
Probably 5 grams. Yeah. I think that's probably a good therapeutic dose. If you can do 10, that would be better, probably. But again, it's hard to stomach. It's something that I'm not able to take every day just because I can't really stomach it. It kind of irritates my stomach. So it's not something that I've been able to do in my own protocol.
Okay. All right. Okay. Well, that's super interesting, though. And it would be amazing to have an intravenous study and get a clearer indication of exactly how it can help, because it does, of a lot of supplements, it does seem to be one that more obviously speaks to the nature of what's going on. I know D-ribose does very well for me as well. I tend to be much more functional with it. Okay. So one person wanted to ask you about amino acids. Now, I know that's not what creatine is, but they wanted to ask you because of your study of supplements and so on. Do you think that it makes sense for someone to take, if they have ME-CFS, does it make sense for someone to take a broad spectrum of amino acids, both essential and non-essential, or would it be a good idea to really just do the testing, even if it's expensive, just to get absolutely clear on what your situation is?
Yeah. So yeah, creatine isn't exactly an amino acid. It's made up of 3 different amino acids. We can get it from dietary sources. We can synthesize it on our own. But when I'm talking about creatine therapeutically, we need really, really high doses of it, like from a supplement. It's not something that we can synthesize on our own and have therapeutic effects from. And yeah, with amino acids, similar. So I think, absorption. When you take an amino acid supplement, we have different receptors that absorb very specific amino acids. So when you start supplementing with just one, like tryptophan, for instance, or GABA, you maybe could throw off the balance of others, because these are kind of competitively fight for different receptors to be absorbed. So I would definitely err on the side of caution and not do like one supplement here and there. Taking a broad spectrum, like branched chain amino acid, is pretty common in patients. I can't say that I've seen it do much benefit though. We don't have any studies on this to my knowledge. I think, again, we want to have these in their most natural state possible, and that's through food. So yeah, ME-CFS research shows that we're using kind of salvage pathways to make energy, breaking down proteins and turning amino acids into energy, which is incredibly inefficient. So we can maybe extrapolate that we have a higher demand for that in that regard. I also think that patients have a higher demand for it anyway because we're chronically ill and we're sedentary, and that causes more breakdown of protein. So we have, a protein balance we need to maintain. So our losses are actually probably a bit higher because we're chronically ill and sedentary versus a healthy individual. So we need to make sure our intake matches those losses so that we have protein balance. And the best way to do that is through diet. So, and the best amino acids for us to get through diet are the naturally occurring ones in our food because they're going to be absorbed better. There's going to be better balance with the absorption and the competition between amino acids. So I definitely advocate for very protein quality, high protein quality diet so that we get all the necessary amino acids. And protein, of course, can come from anywhere. It can be animal sources or plant sources. It doesn't really matter in the body where it comes from, but it's really important that we have more dietary protein than the average person because we want to maintain that protein balance.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, Courtney, and it's very sensible advice. So from what I'm hearing, you say, even if you were to do expensive testing to see what the story is with the amino acids, just supplementing with where there's a deficiency may end up actually causing other problems.
It could, yeah, it could throw off the balance. And again, it becomes kind of impractical, right? It's one thing, just like the hormones, you have to test and retest to see where you're at and make adjustments. And, I've never really seen that to work. I used to do a lot of functional medicine testing when I first started working with patients because I was like, oh, this is so cool. It's a different way to look at things. And it gives you so much information. But a lot of the times it wasn't really moving the needle for patients. It wasn't necessarily clinically beneficial. It's just kind of like a academic exercise for research purposes sometimes. So I haven't really seen where that's been beneficial. And I think the best bet is to just kind of, focus on dietary sources first and foremost.
This video is sponsored by Turney, the new artificial intelligence sidekick designed specifically for a select group of illnesses, including ME-CFS and long COVID. Now, Turney is not another ChatGPT. Instead, the platform has indexed pretty much every single paper, every single conference, every single transcript from a YouTube or podcast discussion in relation to ME-CFS and long COVID from the last 10 years. So when you ask Turney a question, you really get a very detailed answer from a wide variety of sources, which allows you to make the best possible decision for your own health. It is just $2 a week, but you can get a further 10% off using the code Patrick10. Please follow the links down in the description box below. The first 3 weeks are entirely free.